Welcome to our live webinar on navigating the 6th edition task content outline and study and test tips. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Cook. I'm the community manager at Rasmus, and I'm thrilled to have you all here today. Before I hand it over to our fabulous featured speaker today, I want to tell you a little bit more about Rasmus. Rasmus is an ABA clinical software company that was inspired by our founder's son, Rasmus, who was diagnosed with autism early on in his life. Our mission at Rasmus is simple yet powerful to help deliver the highest quality behavioral therapy services to 1 million children with autism. We do this by supporting the people who make it all possible: behavior analysts, techs, teachers, parents, clinical directors, and all of you that are here today. So I'm now going to hand it over to the founder and CEO of Pass the Big ABA Exam, Dana Meller. Thank you so much for being here. And while I stop my share and she gets her screen up, I will share one fun fact. This morning popped up a memory on my phone that exactly 11 years ago, I was taking the Pass the Big ABA. Apparently, I think it was I think she said 13 years. So were just getting started, but it was fabulous. And of course, helped me pass the exam. And I'm here today. So I know firsthand how impactful her program can be. So glad y'all are here and hope you can enjoy learning from Donna.
Well, thank you so much. And Amy, honestly, thank you for your support and all the wonderful things that I've watched you do over these 11 years. And it's such an honor and a privilege to have been just even a small stepping stone in your process. So it's you make it all worthwhile. People like yourself who do such good stuff. But all right, well, hi. How exciting! How we're so many people are from so many different places. I think I saw Australia. That's wild early in the morning. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Rasmus for having me. I have a lot that I want to cover with you guys, so I'm going to skip a little bit about me stuff, and I'll make it really fast. And if you have questions at the end about me personally, then I'm happy to answer them. But so I'll have a very brief hello and welcome, and then I'm going to talk about a brief sort of description of the main considerations of the 6th versus 5th edition task list, mostly just like what you should be focusing in on, and I don't want to say worrying about, but if you're a 5th edition student, especially, just some of the important details that you want to add to your study materials. And that's going to include breaking down the domains, just giving you specific differences. And then I'm going to move into what I think is the most important piece, which is the how to study. And I'm going to give you some suggestions because it's a question I hear quite a bit. What should I be doing? How should I be studying? And it's a lot easier to say what you shouldn't do. It's also very easy to ask others and get, sort of generalized information. And what I'm going to share, I hope you will individualize for yourselves, because at the end of the day, there's no shortcut. I mean, that's the first most important thing, but there's also no one way to do it. So I'm going to share some what I think are important, things to sort of fit into your activities, but more importantly, what your focus should be, no matter what it is you're doing. And then I'm going to give you a bunch of strategies for breaking down exam questions that's going to be outside of knowledge-based things. Since we're not going to cover any TCO content today, I'm going to give you some strategies for controlling all the stuff that you can control in a test question before you get into the do I actually know what they're asking me piece. And that's going to also include talking about how to strategize the timing, because I know that's another source of anxiety for folks. Kind of worrying about that 4 hours and it being enough time. And there will be a Q&A if there's time at the end. I'm happy to hang back as long as you guys are. I hope that I've left time for it, but I don't know. Before I move into it, I just want to introduce myself again. I'm Dana Meller. As Amy shared, I am the founder of Pass the Big ABA Exam. The only thing I really find important to share about myself, even with my students in art classes and in general, is just to share something that's not especially flattering. but I think it gives people hopefully hope. One of the things I've noticed as I've, been a member of this community and this field is that there's a lot of attention placed on the advantages that people who come from fancy coursework and fancy clinical and supervision work, and sometimes you feel like you're at a disadvantage because you didn't come from something like that. Maybe it was a career transition. Maybe you did a fast route, and so your coursework is one of the programs that's currently on the list of low pass rates, and whatever it is that makes you feel that you're at some sort of a disadvantage as compared to other people who had superstar supervisors, like Amy. But so if you didn't have that, I want to share my own journey, which is, I was an actress and I had a very late career transition. I went to graduate school while I was performing in a Broadway show, so that's not exactly a very focused curriculum. And I didn't have the best coursework, and I didn't have I actually did have very good supervision, but it wasn't as as heavy duty as supervision is these days, in terms of prepping you for the exam and even the field. And the only reason I share that isn't so that people lose faith in what I have to offer, but because I want people to know that there is a road and there is a trajectory in which, yes, you have to work harder than other people to get there, but it is possible that you don't have to have come out of these, sort of glamorous programs. Now, did that, intensify my process? Yes. Did I have to study harder than maybe some of my colleagues that had better preparation? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I passed the exam. I am fluent. I have, moved into high level leadership roles. And again, it wasn't easy, maybe even a little bit harder. But as soon as I knew that that was the truth, and I acknowledged that for myself, and I knew that it just was going to just be a more difficult journey, not because of anything that I was doing wrong, but just because of, what it was. It is, it all is what it is. It was okay, and I arrived where I am today. So if you're not there at this moment, it does not mean you won't be there. And don't compare yourself to other people. Everybody's journey is different. And at the end of the day, when you do pass, when you are a BCBA, when you do feel, as I call it, super fluent, no one really asks you how you got there, especially if you're doing good work. No one says, oh, how many times did it take you? And where did you go to school? And if they do, you don't have to answer them honestly, I guess, or honestly, people don't ask. I mean, I've been in exam prep for coming on 13 years, and no one asks me how many times I took the exam. I know now it's probably prompted you to wonder. It was once, but it wasn't easy, and I worked much harder than maybe other people who pass on their first try. So I don't want it to ever be like a brag, because it did not come easy, if I'm honest. All right. With all that being said, let's move into what we're here to do. So I want to talk about some of the main considerations for the test content outlines. You probably saw most of this on their website, but if the website is, overwhelming to you, let me make it just a little less abstract or complex. So obviously this is already in effect. It went in effect January 1st. And all exams that are being offered now are based on the 6th Ed TCO. So even if your coursework was based on the 5th edition task list, even if you still have opportunities in the 5th, if you haven't used up all of your 8 attempts, or it hasn't been your 2-year window, you are still taking a 6th edition TCO exam. And I'm surprised every day by how so many people don't realize that. And I know that because we're still getting emails with people asking us for 5th edition content. And I'm curious how many of you who are going to be sitting for the exam are surprised to hear that, or were confused about the dynamic, about that detail, because I have found that a lot of people were. So I just wonder what went wrong with the communication there. And also, another question I meant to ask is, are most of the people here sitting for the exam, or are you supervisors that are looking to support your trainees in some way? Just curious what everybody is. You can answer that as I move on. Okay, awesome. So I see there's a supervisor and a lot of people sitting. I love that. I love when supervisors also show up. So thank you for being here. That's a real testament to the kind of supervision you're probably providing. Well, all right, good. So there's definitely a little something for everybody. So for the BCBA exam, there is the same number of questions and pilot questions. If you're taking the BCABA exam, there is the same number of actual questions, but there's more pilot questions. It's actually 25. So 150 test questions and 25 pilot questions. That is more. And in case you don't know which questions are pilot. So you have to really treat, the exam every question as an important question. Don't try to guess which ones you think are pilot. And so that also means that, if you're taking a test, it's not really 175 questions that you're planning your timing for. It's 185. There are still the 9 sections. Now they're called domains, and they do cover the same areas. The one big difference is that domain E, which used to be the 6 sections of the code, is no longer that. So it definitely references code items, but it's a lot broader than just knowing the code. That doesn't mean you don't have to know the code, because I think and this is just my opinion, nobody told me this, but my feeling is that the reason they did it this way is because really the code should be subsumed throughout the entire TCO, not just this separate section. And one of the things I did differently in the way that I prepped my materials in the 6th edition is, rather than having the code be its own sort of separate chapter, I've sort of built it in throughout, just to, again, increase the focus on ethics in everything. And I think that might be the way to study as well, is to really look at, not just study the code in isolation, but really place it into how it belongs in probably primarily sections C, D, F, H, and I. With A and B, it's a little bit more theoretical. So there's, the code is less fitting in there, even though it does. I mean, obviously, there are the dimensions, which sort of addresses how we behave as behavior analysts and our philosophy. So there's definitely ethical components. But for supervisors, if you can build in the ethics code into more practical application stuff, you're going to be doing a really great service to your supervisees. And supervisees try to find those ethical components in the behavior change procedures, in measurement, in assessment, in choosing strategies and things like that. Now, it is also something you're going to notice is it's a lot more comprehensive in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm worried about this particular aspect of the code and also the TCO, because there's so much change going on politically right now. So I'm not sure if that's going to force the board to make changes as well. I really hope not, but everything is a little bit uncertain. So if funding is reliant on changing language, we may see that happen. Again, just my opinion. And also, there's more inclusive and compassionate language in general. So you're going to see less, words like deficits and problem behaviors, and you're going to see that framed. I hate to say positively, because as we know, being in the field, it's not always positive, but it is framed in a more, inclusive and compassionate way for the population that we serve. And some other things I just wanted to share. The biggest differences are just the verbs. I'll point out, the big things, but the broadest changes you'll see is that the verbs are different. And I think that's not so much about anything that you guys have to do. It's more about the BACB using verbs that are testable, right? And so that's really the main distinction across the board. And let's talk about each domain. So domain A, there is really not a lot of distinction. They're almost identical, same number of items. There are more exam questions now, where it used to be 6. It's now 8. It's not a huge difference, but I used to really point people in the direction of gambling when they study. Think like, if you've only got a few weeks left and you really have to decide where to put your energy, put it on the section with the most test questions. And something I think you'll find now is there's a little more even distribution, not fully even, but they've increased the numbers in all the sections that were less. So I'm going to move straight into B, which since A does not have anything dramatic to worry about. There are more items in section B now. And if you're like me, you're probably like, oh, as if there weren't already too many. It used to be only 15. I can't believe I'm saying only 15 because that seemed like so much. And now it is 24 items. And I'll share those difference. And even though there's more items, there are fewer exam questions. And one of the things that I find kind of telling about this section in particular is there are 24 items. So I would bet, and again, nobody told me this, these are my own, opinions, that the every TCO item is going to be tested, right? Because because there's 24 questions. So whereas before you might have had 2 on each section, now I would bet there will be 1. And again, just my bet, which that could be a little less scary if there's a section you're really struggling with. Hopefully that's correct. That shouldn't really change how you're studying. Hopefully that just, I don't know, gives you a little sense of relief. So let me show you some of the new items. B20, the role of multiple control and verbal behavior. This is probably something you studied in the 5th edition task list. However, it was never really directly stated. So if you didn't go there, definitely take a look at multiple control, things like convergent, divergent control across all of the operants. They've also removed the idea of high P. Well, actually, they never had it, but it was more like positive reinforcement procedures. Now they've added a focus on behavioral momentum and this concept of response persistence. So they really want you to understand not the procedure so much, which of course you understand what a high P request sequence is, but what that request sequence is based on. And remember, the section B is a lot of the concepts and principles. So this is, making sure that you understand how schedules of reinforcement build behavioral momentum and how they incite persistent responding. Again, not a strategy. I almost said strategery. That is not a word, but I use it as a joke so often that it almost came out for real. See that? You got to be serious all the time. So anyway, be sure that you understand this philosophically and less procedurally as far as section B is concerned. Also, matching law. Now, we all know matching law. We've talked about it in so many different ways, but now look what it's connected to, response allocation. And so this is letting us know that they really want you to understand this from the philosophical, just, human behavior space. And this makes sense to me because one of the things I notice with my students and supervisors, this is important for you, is they're not connecting this the science as they study for the exam in a very sort of natural, organic way. They're almost like not being behavior analytic as human beings. And a good friend of mine once said that, behavior analysis is a way of life. I hate to make it sound like a cult, but if you can become a more behavior analytic thinker and look at behavioral momentum and matching law and response persistence and allocation in everyday life, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to rationalize and justify the procedures that, you come upon in section G. So I think that's what they're doing. They're trying to make us all more just behavior analytic thinkers. Distinguishing between imitation and observational learning. Most of you have probably studied observational learning, but it was really not included in any of the task lists in my past. And I've been doing this since the 3rd edition. So observational learning is a new idea that's brought up. Imitation, we all have known about. So some of the new vocabulary, multiple control. And when I finish the slide, you're welcome to take a screenshot and you'll have the terms to focus on. And you'll see a lot of them are not words you wouldn't have studied, but they're now, they're actually included in the TCO rather than being things you knew to study. Response persistence, matching law, response allocation, observational learning. Now, something else that we all studied before, but is included in the TCO, because there was always respondent conditioning, which would include respondent extinction, but now they've kind of included respondent extinction, in contrast to operant extinction. So in the past, it wasn't really isolated, which means it may or may not have been on the exam. I don't know, but now they're letting us know this is something you should be familiar with. And emergent relations and generative performance. This is all stuff you would have studied, but this is the language that they're trying to promote. So this is all going to be aligned with equivalence-based instruction, stimulus equivalence, things you've been studying if you're a fifth edition person, but start to adopt this new language. Remember, derived relations, this all falls under those same umbrellas. So just make sure that when you hear emergent relations or generative performance, if those are new terms, for you to connect them to the other terms that also essentially mean similar or the same things. All right, so domain C, some key distinctions. There are more items. This is our measurement, 12 versus 11, not dramatic. And also, not also, there are the same number of test questions in C. So the new items here are efficiency. Now, you've studied trials to criterion before, but you've probably never heard it called efficiency. As soon as I saw this item, it all of a sudden made sense to me what trials to criterion was really for. Not that I didn't know by reading it in textbook, but I understood it in a different way because it's being paired with cost benefit analysis and training duration. And it made me realize that what it's really connected to now is, trials to criterion is how long did this take? And did it take too long? And did it take so long that it's not worth it, right? So connecting it to recommendations and expectations. So not just looking at how long it took, but how long should it take and what's reasonable and when are you just torturing people, right, with working on programs that aren't necessarily going to be things they can acquire, or are your programs completely ineffective because it's taking so long? So in a way, it's nothing new, but it's organizing it, right, in a new way. Because I would bet, and you guys tell me, please, if you've ever looked at these three vocabulary words at all in this sort of efficiency way. And then so selecting a measurement procedure to obtain procedural integrity data. So you've heard procedural, sorry if you can hear my dog, you've heard procedural integrity data before, but now look what it's connected to, relevant dimension, accuracy, dosage. I love that they're using the word dosage because the number of hours we suggest should be looked at as a dosage, right? And that instantly kicks in the ethical things like, how many hours you recommend. And if you really look at it as dosage, how many of you would now change your answer if you were asked a question like, should parents collaborate on how many hours are recommended? Absolutely not, right? That's a dosage. That's the expert's job. However, they should collaborate on the treatments and the goals and what, maybe even the criteria. But dosage, that sounds kind of medical, right? I know we're not medical doctors, although when the insurance companies first started funding services in California, they hadn't adjusted the forms. And to be honest, I don't know if they still have. So anytime we would get an insurance form under physician, it would say the director's name or the BCBA's name. So sometimes that was me. And I remember taking it to to my parents' house and being like, oh, I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a doctor now, but I'm a physician. I just loved the way that looked, but I'm not a doctor. I just play one on an insurance form. But anyway, dosage certainly should change how you look at that. So some new vocabulary. Again, I'm just repeating efficiency. This is new ways of phrasing things, cost benefit analysis. I know we always studied this, but it's actually on the TCO now. Training duration. And they also have added, even though we've always studied continuous versus discontinuous measurement, they're no longer saying time sampling and they're no longer saying interval recording. Of course, that's what discontinuous measurement is, but they're using that language and they're really wanting us to understand the difference because they're pitting them against each other. Procedural integrity instead of fidelity or treatment integrity. This is across the board. I'm seeing this used more than the other. Again, it doesn't mean that the other is wrong, just sort of, highlighting some of the language that's being pushed. And accuracy. I've always studied accuracy. I've always taught accuracy, but I looked back on the TCO and I realized it hasn't been on it, or the task lists, I should say, and it hasn't been on it in a while. I always just thought of, reliability, accuracy, and validity as the elements of trustworthy measurement. So I always sort of put them together. For me, they're still together, but they are separated as their own thing on the TCO. And dosage, as I already said. There's also language like environmental constraints. Again, not new words for us, but new to the TCO. I hope this is all helpful so far, if you haven't sort of looked at this in this sort of way. Key distinctions for D, there are more items, 9 versus 6. That's a big difference, especially given that people already didn't like experimental design. Now we've got not just more items, but we've got one more test question. And because there are 9 items and 13 questions, you could have, 2 questions on something that you don't particularly enjoy. And I do want to say one thing philosophically about domain D, which is one that everybody sort of says, oh, that's not me. I don't do experimental design. I really, really want to push how important it is for you to be fluent in experimental design. And I don't mean that you should be able to go into a lab tomorrow and, work with pigeons and rats. I just mean you really need to be able to visualize these designs as if you could and explain them and even, do them with puppets, not, people or animals, but really do them in some sort of, role play way, because that is going to, you're going to find a really profound connection to other sections just with a better understanding of section D, which I think a lot of people don't realize. So if I can push you in all those directions, then, I can absolutely make the slides available. Yep, I sure can. New TCO items are going to be identifying threats to internal validity. This is something you should have studied, but it was never its own sort of, exclusive item. So now they're telling you, yes, know this. So if you only studied internal validity and sort of took the task list at face value, and people told you to know the threats, now you know for sure they are there. And so, we've never seen the words history and maturation on the task list. Now it's there. And there's others too. Critique and interpret data from single case experimental designs. So I love this one because this is something you can do on a multiple choice exam, right? Versus design a single case. How can they test you on your ability to design? But critique and interpret, this is important. This means you should be able to look at any experimental design and be able to interpret, the prediction, the verification, the replication, the progress at any one of them. So that for me is a call to action to focus a lot more on visual inspection. And so the new vocabulary, threats to internal validity, the word history, maturation, they are not new words to you, I would imagine, but just in case. Domain E. So this is where we get the differences get a little sexier here. We have obviously independent items instead of 6 code items. So that means more items. There's now 12 items versus 6 before, and there are a few more exam questions. And now they're not going to be as black and white code questions. It's going to be specific to some of the themes of the TCO. Now, I'm not going to give you all 12 sections, but I am going to share the sections that didn't really fit with anything that existed before, whereas a lot of the the domain E sections really were things you would have been familiar with had you studied the code in the past. So core principles underlying the code. I always had my students study and memorize this, but it was not one of the code items. So now this is something you should know, and this is something that you should be able to apply. What I love about the core principles is if you're not able to connect an actual code item very directly, the code's a pretty thick document, right? If you look at any scenario that's asking you to discriminate if something is ethical or not, just ask yourself if it aligns with the core principles. Is it benefiting others? Is it an example of treating others with compassion, dignity, and respect? Is it behaving with integrity? And if the scenario does not fall under one of these principles, then you know that this is probably not an ethical scenario. So you don't always have to align it with a code item, especially because code items are not meant to be so black and white. There's context, there's nuance, right? When you're actually dealing with an ethical dilemma. But here you're getting four options that don't have a lot of, space for, but what if, and how about when? And these are all the examples in my own experience, right? So this is a good way to, on test questions, in life too, but especially on test questions, to stay kind of black and white in how you address what is really gray area stuff. Identifying the risks to oneself, others, and our profession. You know the answer to this. However, make sure that you really get those lists right in your head about what are these specific risks so that it isn't just a vague, the risks could be, loss of funds. Sure, but really be specific and look for the literature that addresses some of the case studies of, unethical behavior and some of the negative implications. This one, again, really important. And this one I would imagine nobody has any information on, because I couldn't find like a specific article or source that just literally addressed interpersonal skills. How do you learn those? We call those soft skills in psychology or in mentalistic therapies. And I think that's the board's way of introducing that to some of us stuffy behavior analysts, right? We're kind of known for not being collaborative and not being especially, and being so sciencey, right? That we lose sight of, we're also learning and should be accepting feedback and should be listening and seeking input even after we have those letters. And of course, the collaborative piece. So definitely take a look at E8 and try to find some stuff online, not on ChatGPT, because this is new. So anything ChatGPT is going to write to you about new stuff is not going to be correct. There's not enough stuff on the internet to, feed ChatGPT on this stuff. And then here, as I promised, cultural humility in service delivery and professional relationships. So notice it says both. So you have to exhibit this in both dealings with your clients and the people with whom you work, as well as collaborate. And there's more about that in some of the other sections as well. So this is section E, definitely seeps into all of the other sections. Amy, can you remind me what my stop time is? For whatever reason, I forgot to note that in my head because
We have the full hour. So,
oh, good. Okay, then I'm doing great.
yes. And if it's shorter, it's fine too, but
It's
that's
not
what
going to be shorter. This is my problem in life. I take too long on everything. But I practice this, so I think I've got it down. Good luck to us. Okay, so domain F, key distinctions, fewer items in domain F, 8 versus 9, and some of that fewer is that they have consolidated some sections. I'm going to give you guys, by the way, a QR code when I'm done with this section for a crosswalk that's free on our website if you haven't seen that. And that's going to be a lot more specific, and it's going to go item by item what the distinctions are. So feel free to download that and you'll be able to dig a little bit deeper. This is like, a shorthand version. But I think this is the important stuff. So it's not that this isn't enough, but if you're curious, you can have a bigger document. More exam questions from 18 to 23. So again, assessment, with functional analysis not being in everybody's wheelhouse, this makes it a little scarier because if there's 8 items and 23 questions, that lets you know there's going to be a lot of repetition, right? You're going to be tested on certain things more than once. So the new stuff, integrating relevant cultural variables into the assessment process. And that's really it. But there is some different vocabulary. So cultural variables, you're going to see words like client informed, which of course you already know. And you're going to see words like culturally responsive, which falls into those cultural variables. Domain G. And by the way, Kayla, your question about the slides being available for reference, I think that for those of you that are supervisors, the full crosswalk would be more beneficial than this, which is very, very shorthand. Okay, so domain G, fewer items. So that's a relief because that was the biggest item before, but not that much less stuff. So 19 versus 22, and fewer exam questions in G. In fact, 10 fewer, which I think is major. So that lets you know Again, just my opinion, just how I'm disseminating it. Don't come for me if that's not your experience. But my feeling is that they really want to ensure knowledge, understanding, philosophy, and that procedures are a lot more relative to your place of work. And there's a lot of variability in how certain things can be done. So testing on those things is a little bit more difficult than really making sure that you're coming from a place of knowing how to interpret, the literature and knowing how to interpret the experiments that we base our procedures on. And then again, just that philosophical piece is definitely, you know, uh, what it looks like is being pushed more. Okay, so some new items. So emotional and elicited effects. Um, and so that's definitely new, even though you've probably talked about this. Now, this is for me combined with a section in a domain section in H. So that's how I've actually even combined it in the manual because emotional, elicited, unwanted, you might have heard before. So this is a little bit of that, but more. And that's it for G. That's the only thing that's new. But some vocabulary is emotional and elicited effects. And then something different is differential reinforcement with and without extinction. And you're going to notice that there is no more extinction as its own procedure. Now, you have to know extinction as the concept or the principle with, the principle of not having reinforcement that used to be delivered. Not having it delivered anymore. And you have to know how to pair it with other procedures. But I think this is the board's way of saying do not do extinction on its own. It's problematic. It's not especially compassionate for our clients. Again, that I don't think that is something you have to start changing in your work, but there has to be a reason that it's no longer its own isolated procedure in section G. And something else that you're going to see is time-based reinforcement, which now it used to say NCR, which it still does, but they're also adding time-based reinforcement, which lets me think that maybe people weren't testing well on their understanding of the schedules in NCR versus the schedules in, contingent reinforcement procedures. Schedule thinning, even though you studied that, if you studied anything to do with maintenance and generalization and prompt, dependence and avoiding that. So you've studied schedule thinning, but it is now actually, you know, a stated term. Transferring to naturally occurring reinforcers. Again, something you all know about, but definitely now stated for the first time. And let's move into H. So key distinctions, there's fewer items. I do find that there was some consolidation, but also H for me has become more important seeming, even though there's fewer items, only by one. There are more questions. So from 16 to 20 in section H. And so here are some of the new items. Planning for and attempting to mitigate relapse of behavior. Relapse is not a word we've seen on the task list before, but we have seen terms in relapse, like spontaneous recovery. But there is a lot more stuff in the relapse umbrella, stuff that's existed. So if you had really solid coursework, you know what this is. If your coursework was like exclusively covering the task list, which that's sad, but if that's the case, it's okay. Remember, in the beginning I said, it is what it is. You have to do your due diligence to catch up, which sucks, but it is what it is. But if you haven't looked at relapse before, and all of this stuff is in Cooper, of course, and if you have our manual, it's in there as well. And so some of the new vocabulary that's come out of it. So the mitigating relapse and just relapse in general. Now, there's also this idea of contextual fit. This did exist before in different language. So that's why I didn't call it a new area, but I wanted you to think of this new vocabulary. So that's going to include cultural variables and environmental resources. So when you're deciding what procedures to use, right, you are also considering if your organization has the resources, and environmental resources also means staff training. And it also means that, if you don't have staff that are trained in a certain procedure, you could try another procedure, right? That's a way to avoid those long waiting lists. There are options. I'm not saying that's the best solution, but it is an ethical one rather than, making people do things that they're not skilled in. Now we have another one, unwanted effects. So I talked about that in G, and notice that word mitigate. So it's not just knowing what these things are, but knowing what are some of the strategies, right, for reducing these or offsetting these effects. Also identifying them proactively so that you don't cause more harm. And I think that's why this is being implemented now is there's been so much focus on some of the harm that can be done in, some of the processes that people employ, and especially with, clinicians out there with not solid training and just, doing a lot of default technology-based intervention. So this is going to make us more aware of looking at our clients and the messages that they send us that lets us know that these procedures are harming them or, not ideal, or we're not, cushioning the procedures in a way that prevents some of the harm. Because there is a way to implement some of the, from punishment to extinction. There's a way to do it that not only sets your clients up for long-term success, but also reduces the possibility of harm. And that's what these sections are. And then we, excuse me, coffee is really great for lubricating the throat. You guys, January 1st, I was supposed to start drinking more water. I have the big cups to promote that. I can't do it. I hate water. Is that bad? That's bad. Coffee and Coke, that's all, Diet Coke, that's all I want to drink. But I'm doing better. I'm doing better, even though I do not have any water on my desk right now. So domain I, some key distinctions. Sparkling water, I know, I do the liquid, I do all of it, but I want coffee or I want a Coke Zero. That's what I want. And why shouldn't I have what I want? So there are fewer items in domain I, not majorly, as you can see. And there are more questions. So you guys have probably seen, if you're in the field long enough, that supervision is being pushed, and that's because supervision is being essentially, I think, blamed for some of the problems in the field, which I think is fair. Not everybody is Amy Cook. And so they are really forcing you guys that are studying for this exam, and actually not everybody is the awesome supervisors that are here today as well. I want to give credit where it's due. But I think, this extra focus is really an effort to motivate the new BCBAs to study this section in a way that equips them with better supervision skills. These sections, they didn't even exist in such a way when I was studying for this exam. And, we didn't have contracts, and we didn't, even though the literature on effective supervisory practice has existed, from the 70s, I want to maybe 80s, it just wasn't really emphasized. And now, this is going to be the make it or break it thing for us. And, only two more questions, but still a big focus in our field. So some of the new items, really, it's just one new item, but there is some different language, and there's definitely more literature to draw information about the existing items. But promoting equity in supervision practices. This is potentially a section that will not last, given that that word is, I don't know if they're going to make it illegal. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm sure you've seen in the news that they're taking the, anything to do with equity sort of out of governmental things, which means that, if the BACB is a private entity, but if they have government funders like regional centers, this could prove to be problematic. I don't know. I hope not, but am I getting political? Yes, stop it. Okay, so equity and supervision practices. Make sure you really know the difference between equity and equality. I think a lot of people skip studying that word because it sounds like something familiar, but a test question on equity is harder than you think. Okay, so some new vocabulary. So equity and in supervision specifically, because that's where we're setting people up for success, and we want to make sure that everybody has, the same opportunity, and not everybody comes into the supervision relationship with the same number of tools. So supervisors definitely don't forget to give, extra support to people who may not have some of the needed resources right off the bat. Cultural variables, once again, you're seeing that language. And this is not new, but empirically validated, management procedures that existed. This is going to include a lot of the literature that's already been out there. There's, the 7 steps to supervisory practices. Within that, we have the behavior skills training, 7 steps, right? Some people say 6, some people say 5, depends on how you put it all together. So all of that's already existed. The thing that's added now is the cultural responsiveness to that section. Okay, so here's that QR code for that crosswalk. So I'm going to move into the study tips and things like that. Now I'm going to ask you to, if you have any questions about the domain, I'm going to save that till the end if you don't mind, and go through this second portion. But please take advantage of the crosswalk. This is going to be a much more comprehensive breakdown of the two the comparison, I should say. All right, so let's talk about how to study. I want to lead with one thing, which is not in my slides. It is also on our website. Yes, it's totally on our website. But just in case you haven't seen that, yeah. And I'm also happy to see that I'm not alone in the water hatred. Okay, so what I want to say about studying is I want to, before I tell you how to do it, I want to talk about just a few ways that people are misusing content that's out in the world. One of the things that I see as a pattern, whether it's from my own students that have come to me after, not having passed the exam and trying different things, or, I'm on the, Facebook pages that you're all on. I'm not like stalking those pages. It does seem like I'm like, what are they all talking about? But that's how I learn, about you guys and what people need and what are some of the bottlenecks in the exam prep world. And a few things that I see that trouble me, and I'll share those with you, are the solicitation of, unethical materials. So there are people that are really taking advantage of the vulnerability. I also don't think it's ethical to like create a Facebook page and, then start to solicit business from that page that's meant to support people. But that's just my opinion. But the biggest thing that I find problematic is people are taking all the mock exams they can get their hands on, free ones, paid for ones, and they're taking mock exam after mock exam after mock exam as their only study activity. And then after they review those mock exams, they study from those mock exams, those same ones, and then they retake them. And then they celebrate changes in scores. And one of the things that you have to know is not one, a few things, is first of all, mock exams only cover a small portion of what you could possibly be tested on in any section of the TCO. So just studying them really limits how global and how broad your understanding of any concept can be. The other piece is that once you've reviewed a mock exam, even and then studied it no less, it's no longer a valid measure of your progress. So not only is it limiting, but it's also just not giving you a comprehensive picture, right? It's a misleading picture, an artifact of what you know and don't know, if that's your small little world of mock exam prep. I don't have a problem with a bunch of mocks. I don't even have a problem with crappy mock exams, because at the end of the day, if it makes you think and it teaches you to discriminate, and if you're out there going, this is a, shitty question, excuse my French, then that's great too, right? There's value to every experience, but there is no value to avoiding studying the content, the textbooks, the articles that some of this stuff is based on. And that's going to be all the stuff that's not in Cooper or Meyer or any of the other textbooks, but that only currently exists in research-based content. And there is no value in a superficial understanding. So here is what I consider the criteria for readiness, which is not scoring a certain percentage on all the mock exams, which is another thing I see people saying, hey, if I score, 68% on Celia's mock, who I, by the way, love, she's a great friend. She peer reviews all my content, but 68%, did anybody else score 68% and pass? That is just not going to be a valid or reliable criteria for determining readiness. What is going to be a reliable criteria is if you can go down every single TCO item and discuss it. Discuss it like it's your language, not like it's some foreign thing. Like if I were to take an exam on, automobile mechanics that I just studied and then went in with superficial, hope my memorized terms, get me through. It shouldn't be that. It's can you talk about it like it's your language with another professional, another candidate? Can you explain it to someone so that they understand it? And I don't mean explain it in the, richest, most densest way, but can you explain it to a friend who is not in the field that they understand that concept, even if just, uh, superficially? And then for the procedural stuff, can you do it? Now, you're not going to have an opportunity to do all of the procedures that are outlined in the TCO in your supervision, in your clinical work, or even in your coursework sequences. But there's nothing wrong with, taking a couple of items and acting out an FA or acting out a multiple baseline design just so you experience some of the steps that you're memorizing so that you can sort of see, do I know these steps, right? And do I understand the logic behind these steps? I realize logic's a little harder when you're using, puppets or pens as people, but it's better than nothing. And if you can go through that TCO, explain it to someone else so that they understand it, talk about it like it's your language, and do the thing tomorrow or teach a team to do that thing tomorrow, then you're ready. That's readiness. And there's no way you could assess that from one or 100 different mock exams. Now, with that being said, are mock exams helpful? Yes. If you do well on most of them, is that a good sign? Of course. If you do poorly, also probably some sort of an indicator. But don't let that be your go-to. It's a cheap and short way of getting the job done, and you don't want your doctor studying mock exams and not case studies, and not understanding why the experiments have led to the medications that they're recommending. Medications, aka interventions. Um, but yes, exactly. There's lots of things that mock exams are good for. So, study tips: organizing the vocabulary. There's a couple ways to do that. Creating flashcards, SAFMEDs, or writing out definitions in your own words. And then, of course, reviewing these things and reviewing them repetitively. Now, I'm not a believer in rote memorization. So when you are studying, whether through flashcards, SAFMEDs, or just definitions written out, that's a good time to add your own examples, your visuals that help you remember, anything that creates salience, right? Studying with a partner is great, especially if your materials are conducive to someone testing you. And if you're studying with another person taking the exam, that's two opportunities to talk about it. But don't rotely recite definitions. Take your card, content and add to it, expand upon it, discuss it as you study with each other. Oh, that's interesting. I'll look into that in just a second. Weird. But you can get it on our website, and I'm really sorry about that. I'll figure that out, and maybe we can have Amy send a link to everyone as well. Try to apply the vocabulary to everyday life events and activities. If you can find those principles and those concepts in your lives, you're already a step ahead. Now, this is an activity, which you can do this or the cards or both if you feel like you need to double up. I've got it in a 3-step process. So there's the antecedent setup for my outline process. So you want to set up your environment. That means, get a notebook that you like to write in, get preferred writing utensils, pens that feel wonderful to write with, and a notebook that's just cushy and delicious that you are going to look forward to writing in. Create a schedule so that these are the hours you're spending for this particular activity. And I am sharing my screen. I'm pretty sure I am. I think if you go to the top, it's because on mine
I
it
can still
shows.
see it.
Oh, you
You can
can.
see your I can see your screen.
Okay, great. You can create a schedule so that you're not feeling guilty when you're not actually, doing the ABA studying. You know that it wasn't on your schedule, so it's okay to have a little balance and go out to dinner or go to the gym or something else, spend some time with your family. Because you know it's not on your schedule, but also reschedule it if you cancel it for any reason, just as you would a client. Treat yourself with the same integrity and respect as you would someone else, which most of us are kinder to others than to ourselves. Then organize your work area, especially if you're someone who gets distracted by a messy area. I know for me, if I have a project and my desk is messy, I can't get started. Or if I'm working in my living room and there's laundry, that needs to be folded. So get everything done so that you have nothing distracting you. Things that have, maybe lower response effort and are more reinforcing for you. Like for me, cleaning my house, I like to do that. Plan some snacks and drinks that are specific to this activity. So create a little deprivation, right? Don't allow yourself these things unless it's when you sit down to do these study activities. And then get out all your textbooks, print out the TCO, and then the process. So you're going to read each item, and then you're going to put the info that you've read into your own words. Thanks, Amy. I appreciate it. I'm so sorry about the QR code. So put the information into your own words and not copying from textbooks, not copying from the task from our manual. So think simple definition, bullet points, not full sentences. You can use your own words. If you're really good at rote definition memorizing and it makes sense to you, then you can do that. I don't find that to be true for most people. Don't write anything down that you don't understand, and include for yourself examples, related terms like, concurrent schedule of reinforcement. Throw in that matching law from, this other section belongs there as well. Are there umbrellas? Are there uses? Are there pros and cons, AKAs? Are there visuals that you like or you want to create? And are there some acronyms that will help you remember? And I know this sounds like you're creating a manual, right? And you kind of are, but a shorthand one that is only meaningful to you. And then, of course, the outcome of this process is that you're going to figure out what your gaps are. Those of you that are retaking the exam, this is a really important process because you might not otherwise figure out where you're missing something. And it's also going to give you a simple to use study source for yourself. Okay. Now, I want to talk about using mock exams and how to get the most out of them. Role play the exam day for every mock exam. That means set a timer and record your timing. Take the tests alone in quiet and isolated spaces. If you need, use that divider thingy so that you create that claustrophobic Pearson view vibe. Create a whiteboard prior to each practice test. And if you're going to wear earplugs, wear them when you take practice tests because that's a different kind of feeling. And even practice wearing the clothes you're going to wear so that you've controlled for every environmental variable except, of course, what's going to be on the test. And take those planned breaks. All right, I'm probably like 2 minutes behind, but I will speed up a little bit. So one thing about the practice tests, do not focus on test scores. This is a process. What you do want to do what you do want to do for getting the most out of mock exams is to learn from your mistakes. So making mistakes is awesome. Identify those mistakes. Are those mistakes knowledge-based mistakes? So then study. And then also, if they're not knowledge-based, but behavior-based mistakes, then what are those behaviors? And are you identifying patterns across multiple mocks that you might want to address? In my workshops, I do like a self-monitoring thing where we get some empirical evidence so that you can make an informed decision. Like if you're someone who changes correct answers, if there's enough evidence, then maybe, then maybe you can, skip checking your work. Okay, so breaking down exam questions, and this is I need like 2 more minutes, so if you don't mind, and I'm happy to stay longer and answer questions as well. So things to do: look at the last sentence first. That gives you your call to action. Look at answer choices for context. If you're like, what is this asking me? Sometimes the answer choices will clue you in. Then narrow the field, right? That's going to include things like getting rid of words that are obviously incorrect, made up terms, terms that fall under different umbrellas, just different TCO items all together. Not sure why there's a colon there. Sorry about that. Find those words that change the meaning. Are there negative words? Not, except, other than. I often hear that people struggle discriminating between three questions. Uh-oh, what was that? Is everything okay? I'm
Everything's
still
still going. We're good.
okay. Okay, good. People say, oh, there were two or three correct answers. And what I've discovered is a lot of people are not identifying a word that changes the meaning, which would then, of course, make three answers right versus one. Watch out for semantics. This is, how you would identify positive versus negative. Is there a fine, or did you pay a fine, or did you get a ticket? And then breaking down ABCs, try to use the ABCs to identify positive, negative, reinforcement, punishment, extinction versus punishment, operant versus respondent, prompt versus SD. This is something we definitely cover in the workshop. We map it out this way. And if you need help with that, I'm happy to explain that. To you guys after the fact. Identifying the behavior of interest first and foremost. And then some general considerations. Don't test from the perspective of your clinical work. Test from the perspective of the board. What are they testing you on? Using your whiteboard, I highly recommend planning that in advance. Taking a break at some point. If you get stuck, let it go. You don't have to get 100% on this thing, 76%, so you can make lots of mistakes. And before you commit, read carefully. If you're stuck between two, choose the most specific option. Don't come back to it. Don't over flag and over leave blank. And before you click that box, make sure that every word fits, that there isn't a word that changes the meaning. And if you don't know, take a guess, 25% chance. So don't leave anything blank, and don't leave things blank to come back to at the end. Be honest with yourselves. Like, if you don't know it and you're not going to know it, just commit to a guess and move on with your lives. Click the right box and pretend you're living in a perfect world. That means don't judge the questions. Some of them are going to be silly. Some of them are going to feel like this isn't ethical, or this isn't possible. Don't worry about that. Just look at that last sentence. What are they testing you on? And of course, look for the least crappy answer. If a test question is especially problematic, there's probably a right answer. Okay, and this is the last slide, scheduling. So the exam is 4 hours. I suggest about a minute per question. That's absolutely feasible. It may not sound like it, but it is. This is an average, which means some questions will take more, some will take less. And that gives you 185 minutes to answer questions, and 55 minutes left to do things like fill out the board, take a break, and for review time. So with 1 minute per question and a plan for review, are you going to go through everything? Are you going to just go through the last minute guesses, or are you going to look at flagged questions, or all of it, right? Decide in advance, but just know that you have about 34 seconds per question with my schedule. So, and it's completely feasible. So in addition to that 1 minute, you can add another 34 seconds for review time. And if you decide you're not reviewing because you change correct answers, that's even more time at the front end. And plan this schedule. Know in advance what it's going to look like, because this is something you can control versus, what you're going to be tested on, which you cannot. All right. Those of you that have to go, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm sorry about the rush at the end. Good luck to you. You've got this. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to email us. And if people do have questions, and if Amy, you're cool with it, I'm happy to stick around and answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Donna. That was so insightful. And yeah, we do have about 5 minutes for questions. If anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A at the bottom.
By the way, regarding the crosswalk, it is something you have to put in your cart and check out, but it's free, so you don't have to pay. So if that was your experience, that's correct. But we can also just give you a PDF, Amy, if you'd like to email to
Okay.
people. Okay, struggle with timing questions for first attempt. Do you know if there will be the same amount of questions in pilot? Yes, the exact same for BCBA, the exact same. And timing is most likely a fluency problem, right? So when you're studying, make sure it's not just that you know this stuff, but that you can sort of shoot from the hip and you can talk about it, as quickly as you do the things you know very well. That will help you with timing. Thank you, thank you.
They
Are
were
those
wants to know if you can, if there's any limitations on what you can put on the whiteboard.
There's really not. The only thing that you want to make sure to keep in mind is that you want to start your test before you fill out the board. And then the other thing is that you want to make sure that you don't use up more than one because you want to be able to reuse what you've written on it. And I don't know why they don't let you erase. We think it's that if there's any abnormalities, they have that as some kind of evidence. So try to leave a little space for, scratch paper type stuff, and then a part of it for the things that you're going to put there to prompt yourselves. And there is a calculator on the computer, so you don't have to use it for math either. Amy, are you giving me the questions? Is that the deal?
I was just trying to help you out. I don't know if I see, will the BACB allow extra time if you were allowed it on the RBT exam? So, with accommodations.
Yes, but you do have to submit for that. So that is a different exam. So check the site for the specific things that you have to provide to qualify for that. But they do. They absolutely have supports, lots of different types of supports depending on your particular needs. I
Okay.
was
Donna, can you
asking.
click on that Q&A and see? Let's see. This one says, is the TCO streaming video that can be accessed for 24 hours or similar to the workshop?
The Q&A for some reason.
Oh, it's on the, okay, that's okay. It says, not sure what the difference is, and for questions that we can access 7 days on TCO streaming gives us mock exams. Do you know what they're talking about?
Yeah, I do. There are no mock exams on the video lecture series, if that's what you're talking about, and you can stream for 7 days, 1 week, and 30 days. But we do have mini mocks that are their own product that we kept separate so that people could have the choice and not have to increase the price. Um,
Okay. And then there's one on wanting to know if you provide tutoring services.
Well, the truth is, I do have a few hours in the week that I tutor, but it's something that I reserve for the students that take our workshop. It's not really a part of our business. I just do that every once in a while if somebody's really, flailing. But no, not in general. We don't. But the workshop is really intense and comprehensive, so that's a good way to get a lot of what it is I offer. Yeah, I see
Okay.
that.
And then is the sixth edition PTB available on your website? I did all my coursework on the fifth edition, so I know I can't get the fifth.
Yes, it is available, sixth edition. All of our stuff on our website now is sixth edition content.
Awesome. And then someone wants to know, is your manual available as a PDF?
No, unfortunately, it's not. We're working on potentially an ebook, and it's really because of copyright infringement.
Yeah.
We've had such a hard time with it. There was a time where we really wanted to do it, but we can't. We've really been the victim of so much theft. It's wild. But yeah, I wish because I know that would be helpful. Um, if
One
they,
other
they
question, it says, could you let us know if you're going to send us this section? Alberto, are you asking about the crosswalk on that? You can type in the chat this section,
you mean this presentation?
this
Oh, this,
recording. Oh, yes. Yes, all registrants will receive this recording, and that should probably go out by the end of today.
okay. We don't typically do promo codes on the manual. I do think there is an offer that's going to be sent to you guys from us. I wish I knew what it was, but stop being involved in all things office recently, and I feel like I've lost my hands. I don't know anything, but they are going to send you something, from what I understand. Uh,
Okay. Well, I think that is it. I just want to thank you, Donna, for being here today, and thank you, everyone else. Feel free to follow Hierasmus on social media. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook. We have lots of free webinars, podcasts, other resources to help you. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you for learning and growing with us today.
And if anyone didn't get their questions answered, please feel free to email us. I answer all the questions. Just, address it to me and they'll put it in my folder. So if we didn't get to anything, and I hope this was helpful.